He called her trash. He slapped her across the face. He slammed her against the wall and told her she belonged in a garbage dump. He had no idea she was his boss. And in 2 hours, his entire life would be destroyed. This is a true story about what happens when a bully finally meets someone who can fight back. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Welcome to the City of Stories. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you a story that will stay with you long after you finish reading it. It's about power, prejudice, and what happens when someone who thinks they're untouchable finally meets their match. Picture a beautiful Tuesday morning in Seattle. The sun was just starting to peek through the clouds, and the streets near the downtown government complex were beginning to fill with people heading to work. Among them was a woman we'll call Dr. Patricia Hayes. She was walking toward the federal building where she worked, carrying her leather bag filled with important papers for the day ahead. Patricia was dressed simply that morning. No fancy suit, no obvious signs of her position. Just comfortable clothes and that leather bag. She looked like any other person going to work. And that's exactly what made what happened next so terrible. Standing at the entrance to the federal building was a security guard named Vincent Drake. Vincent had worked at that building for 12 years, and in those 12 years, he developed some very ugly habits. He'd learned that he could treat certain people however he wanted, and nobody would stop him. He'd learned that his uniform gave him power, and he loved using that power against people he thought couldn't fight back. When Vincent saw Patricia walking toward the building, something dark flickered in his eyes. He didn't see a professional woman heading to work. He saw someone he could push around, someone he could humiliate, someone who, in his twisted mind, didn't belong in that building. Patricia was just steps away from the entrance when Vincent moved to block her path. She looked up at him, confused but still polite. "Good morning," she said, reaching for her identification. But Vincent wasn't interested in her identification. "Hold up," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Where do you think you're going?" "I work here," Patricia replied calmly. "I'm just heading inside." Vincent laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind of laugh that makes your stomach turn. "Sure you do," he sneered. "Let me guess, you're the janitor? Or maybe you're here to beg for welfare." Patricia felt her heart sink. She'd faced prejudice before in her life, but it never stopped hurting. Still, she kept her composure. "Sir, if you'd just let me show you my ID." She never got to finish that sentence. Vincent's hand shot out and struck her across the face. The sound echoed off the building's stone walls. Patricia's head snapped to the side, and her bag fell from her hands, papers scattering across the ground like fallen leaves. "You don't talk back to me," Vincent snarled. He grabbed her by her jacket and slammed her against the wall. "Trash like you doesn't belong in this building. You belong in a garbage dump where I found you." Patricia tried to speak, tried to explain, but Vincent wasn't listening. He was too caught up in his moment of power. He yanked her arms behind her back and slapped handcuffs on her wrists. The metal bit into her skin. Other security guards had gathered around by now. They had their phones out, recording the whole thing. But they weren't recording to help Patricia. They were recording because they thought it was funny. You could hear their laughter in the background, see their smiling faces as they watched Vincent abuse an innocent woman. "Please," Patricia said quietly. "Just look at my identification. It's in my jacket pocket." "I don't need to look at anything," Vincent shot back. "I can see exactly what you are just by looking at you. Now shut up before I add resisting arrest to your charges." Patricia went quiet then. Not because she was afraid, though anyone would have been. She went quiet because she was thinking. She was remembering every detail, every word, every action. And she was thinking about what was going to happen when the truth finally came out. Vincent dragged her inside the building, past shocked office workers and confused visitors. He was rough, deliberately jerking her around, making sure everyone could see his power over her. He wanted people to watch. He wanted them to see him put this woman in her place. They took her to a holding room inside the building. Vincent threw her into a chair and stood over her, his face twisted with hate. "You're going to learn today," he told her. "You're going to learn that people like you don't get to just walk into buildings like this. There are rules. There are standards. And you don't meet them." Patricia looked up at him, and despite the bruise forming on her face, despite the pain in her wrists from the handcuffs, her eyes were calm. Almost sad. "Are you finished?" she asked quietly. Vincent's face turned red with rage. "Oh, I'm just getting started," he said. "By the time I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never come near this building." What Vincent didn't know What he couldn't have possibly imagined was that he was making the biggest mistake of his entire life. Because the woman sitting in handcuffs in front of him wasn't just anyone. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't trash. She wasn't any of the terrible things he'd called her. Dr. Patricia Hayes was the chief administrator of that entire federal complex. She was the person in charge of every department, every employee, every security guard in that building, including Vincent Drake. And in about 2 hours, Vincent was going to find out exactly who he'd just assaulted. But before that moment came, he had a story to tell. A story full of lies that would sound very convincing to people who wanted to believe them. The wheels of justice were about to turn. And when they did, Vincent Drake's whole world was going to come crashing down around him. They brought Patricia into a hearing room about an hour later. She was still in handcuffs, still wearing the bruise Vincent had given her. The room was formal and intimidating, with wooden panels on the walls and an American flag in the corner. This was where disciplinary hearings happened, where people were judged for breaking the rules of the federal complex. Sitting behind the main desk was a temporary administrator named Harold Foster. He was filling in for someone that day, someone he didn't even know was supposed to be there. Someone who was currently sitting in handcuffs, accused of crimes she didn't commit. Vincent stood at the front of the room, his uniform perfectly pressed, his badge shining. He looked every bit the professional security guard. Nobody looking at him would guess what he'd done just an hour before. "Mr. Foster," Vincent began, his voice smooth and confident. "I need to report a serious security breach that occurred this morning." Harold leaned forward, concerned. "What kind of breach?" "This woman," Vincent gestured toward Patricia without looking at her, "attempted to force her way into the federal building without proper authorization. When I stopped her to verify her identity, she became hostile and aggressive." Patricia sat perfectly still, listening to every word. She wasn't looking at Vincent. She was looking at Harold Foster, studying his reactions, noting how easily he believed what he was hearing. "The suspect was carrying a bag full of official documents," Vincent continued. "Documents she had no legal right to possess. When I asked her how she obtained these materials, she refused to answer. That's when she became violent." Harold's eyebrows went up. "Violent? In what way?" Vincent had his story ready. He'd told versions of it many times before, with different people in Patricia's place. "She started shouting profanities at me, claiming she was someone important, that she had authority in this building. Classic manipulation tactics, sir. They always claim to be lawyers or government officials. Anything to avoid consequences." "And then?" Harold asked. "Then she tried to push past me. I had no choice but to physically restrain her for everyone's safety. She fought back, which is why I had to use force to subdue her." Vincent's voice was filled with false regret. "I never wanted it to come to that, but she left me no choice." Another guard, a man named Thomas Webb, stepped forward. "I witnessed the whole thing, sir." Guard Drake acted with complete professionalism. The woman was out of control. He did exactly what he was trained to do. A third guard nodded along. "She was definitely trying to sneak into the building with those stolen documents. We should be thanking Drake for stopping her." Harold Foster looked at Patricia, seeing the bruise on her face, the handcuffs on her wrists. He saw what he expected to see. Someone who'd broken the rules and gotten caught. "Ma'am, is there anything you'd like to say in your defense?" Patricia spoke for the first time since entering the room. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I'd like to see the security footage from this morning. The cameras outside the main entrance." Vincent's jaw tightened just slightly. A tiny crack in his confident facade. "The cameras?" Harold repeated. "Yes," Patricia said. "The building has cameras positioned every 20 feet along the entrance pathway. They record everything in high definition with audio. I'd like to see what they recorded this morning between 8:45 and 9 o'clock." Vincent jumped in quickly. "Sir, my body camera malfunctioned this morning. Technical issues. It happens sometimes with the older equipment." "How convenient," Patricia said softly. "What was that?" Vincent snapped at her. "I said, how convenient that your camera stopped working right before you assaulted me." Vincent's face flushed red. "I didn't assault anyone. I restrained a criminal who was trespassing on federal property." Harold held up his hand. Everyone calmed down. "Ma'am, do you have any identification on you?" "I tried to show him my identification," Patricia said. "It's in my jacket pocket." He refused to look at it. Vincent laughed. A harsh, mocking sound. "She had some fake ID, probably printed off the internet." I wasn't about to waste my time looking at forgeries. But you didn't actually look at it? Harold asked. I didn't need to look at it, sir. I could tell just by looking at her that she didn't belong in this building. It's part of our training. Profile assessment. Threat detection. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Profile assessment, she repeated. Is that what you call it when you judge someone by the color of their skin? The room went very quiet. Vincent's voice turned cold. Sir, this is exactly what I was talking about. She's trying to make this about race when it's really about security. It's a manipulation tactic. They always play the victim card when they get caught. They, Patricia said quietly. Who exactly are you referring to when you say they, Mr. Drake? Vincent realized he'd said too much. He quickly tried to recover. I mean people who break the law. Criminal types. People who try to sneak into government buildings. But Patricia had heard what he really meant. Everyone in the room had heard it, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Harold Foster cleared his throat. Well, this is certainly a complicated situation, given the seriousness of the charges and the lack of clear video evidence. There is clear video evidence, Patricia interrupted. The building's main security system records everything. It has automatic backups that store to the cloud every 60 seconds. It's designed so that footage can never be lost or erased. Vincent's confident expression finally cracked. Just for a second, genuine fear flashed across his face. I want that footage, Patricia continued. All of it. Every camera, every angle. And I want Mr. Drake's body camera backup files. The system automatically uploads them even when the camera itself malfunctions. That's literally why we installed that system. Harold looked confused. How do you know so much about our security systems? Patricia smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knows the truth is about to come out, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Because, she said quietly, I'm the one who designed them. The hearing room felt different now. The air had changed somehow. Harold Foster was looking at Patricia with new eyes, starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd made a terrible mistake. What do you mean you designed them? Harold asked carefully. Before Patricia could answer, Vincent jumped in. Sir, don't listen to her. This is exactly what I warned you about. She's making up stories, claiming to be someone she's not. It's textbook criminal behavior. But Harold wasn't looking at Vincent anymore. He was looking at Patricia, really looking at her, and something was nagging at his memory. Had he seen her before? That voice, that calm authority in the way she spoke. Mr. Foster, Patricia said, I'd like to make a formal request. I want you to call the main administrative office and ask them where Dr. Patricia Hayes is supposed to be this morning. Can you do that for me? Dr. Patricia Hayes? Harold repeated. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. Yes, the chief administrator of this federal complex. The person whose office is on the 7th floor, right above this hearing room. The person who's been in charge of this building for the last 18 years. The color drained from Vincent's face. That's ridiculous, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. You expect us to believe that you're Dr. Hayes? The Dr. Hayes? I don't expect you to believe anything, Mr. Drake. I'm simply asking Mr. Foster to make a phone call and verify the facts. Harold was already reaching for his phone. His hands were shaking slightly as he dialed the administrative office. The room was so quiet you could hear the phone ringing through the speaker. Administrative office, this is Janet speaking. Janet, this is Harold Foster from Hearing Room 3. I need to ask you something urgent. Is Dr. Hayes in the building this morning? Was she scheduled to come in? There was a pause. Dr. Hayes? Yes, she was supposed to arrive at 9 o'clock for an important meeting. But she never showed up. We've been trying to reach her for over an hour. Why? Is something wrong? Harold's hand went to his mouth. He looked at Patricia, then at Vincent, then back at Patricia. Janet, can you describe what Dr. Hayes was wearing when she left home this morning? I wouldn't know that, sir. But she did mention yesterday that she'd be dressed casually today because she was going to be reviewing construction sites in the afternoon. She said she'd change into her formal clothes after her morning meeting. Is this about? Harold hung up the phone. His face had gone completely white. Get these handcuffs off her, he said quietly. But sir, Vincent started. I said get those handcuffs off her right now. Harold's voice filled the entire room. Thomas Webb fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking as he unlocked Patricia's handcuffs. The metal fell away, leaving red marks on her wrists where they'd been too tight. Patricia stood up slowly, rubbing her wrists. She looked at Vincent, who was now backing away toward the door like he wanted to run. "Mr. Drake," Patricia said, her voice still calm, still controlled. "Months, I've been conducting an internal investigation into security misconduct in this building. Do you know why?" Vincent couldn't speak. He just stood there, frozen. "Because over the past 3 years, we've received 87 formal complaints about security guards in this complex. 87 complaints of excessive force, racial profiling, and abuse of authority. And do you know whose name appeared most frequently in those complaints?" Harold Foster had sat down, his head in his hands. "Yours, Mr. Drake. Your name appeared in 43 of those 87 complaints. 43 times, people came forward and said you'd abused your power. 43 times, they said you'd treated them like criminals simply because of how they looked." Patricia walked slowly around the room, and everyone watched her like she was a judge pronouncing sentence. Which, in a way, she was. "Do you know what happened to those complaints, Mr. Drake?" "They were all dismissed. Unsubstantiated," the report said. "Insufficient evidence. The complainants were just troublemakers trying to avoid consequences for their own bad behavior." She stopped in front of Vincent. "But I knew better, because I read every single one of those complaints. I saw the patterns. I saw your name over and over again. And I started to wonder, what if these people are telling the truth? What if we've been protecting someone who doesn't deserve protection?" Vincent's voice came out as a whisper. "I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Patricia's voice rose for the first time. "Your job is to protect people, Mr. Drake. To make them feel safe when they enter this building. Not to terrorize them. Not to assault them. Not to call them trash and tell them they belong in a garbage dump." "Now wait just a minute," Vincent tried to interrupt. "No, you wait." Patricia's eyes were blazing now. "For 6 months, I've been working with the Department of Justice, with the Civil Rights Division, with federal investigators. We've been building a case, Mr. Drake. A case about systematic abuse in this building's security department. And we were being very careful, very thorough, making sure we had all our evidence lined up perfectly." She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "And then this morning, you gave us the perfect evidence. You assaulted a federal administrator in front of multiple cameras. You lied under oath in an official hearing. You committed perjury. You violated my civil rights. And you did it all because you looked at me and decided I didn't belong here." Vincent's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands. "Harold," Patricia said, turning to the temporary administrator, "I need you to do several things immediately. First, secure all security footage from this morning. Every camera, every backup file. Second, place Mr. Drake under arrest. Third, contact the Department of Justice and tell them we have the evidence they've been waiting for." Harold nodded, already reaching for his phone again. Patricia looked around the room one more time. At the guards who had laughed while she was being abused. At Thomas Webb, who had lied to support Vincent's story. At all the people who had thought they were untouchable. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "court is now in session. And this time, the truth is going to win." The formal hearing began 2 hours later. By then, word had spread through the entire federal building like wildfire. People were gathering in hallways, whispering to each other, trying to understand how something like this could have happened. The hearing room was packed now. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls. News reporters had gotten wind of the story and were setting up cameras outside the building. This wasn't just another disciplinary hearing anymore. This was history being made. Patricia sat at the main desk now, wearing her official administrator badge. Someone had brought her formal jacket from her office. The bruise on her face was still visible, a purple reminder of Vincent's violence. She hadn't tried to cover it up. She wanted everyone to see it. Vincent sat where Patricia had sat earlier, in the defendant's chair. He'd aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. His uniform looked rumpled now, his confidence completely shattered. "This hearing will now come to order," Patricia said, her voice carrying authority that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. "Mr. Drake, you're here to face charges of assault on a federal official, abuse of authority, civil rights violations, and perjury. Do you understand these charges?" Vincent's lawyer, a nervous young man who'd been pulled from another case, stood up. "Your Honor, Dr. Hayes, I'd like to request that someone else conduct this hearing. There's clearly a conflict of interest, since you're the victim in this case." Patricia nodded. "Your objection is noted and overruled. As chief administrator of this complex, I have the authority to oversee any hearing involving security personnel. And Mr. Drake, more than anyone in this building, needs to understand exactly who he assaulted today. He needs to see the consequences of his actions firsthand. She turned to the large screen that had been set up in the room. Let's begin with the evidence, shall we? The screen flickered to life, showing the front entrance of the federal building. The timestamp read 8:47 a.m. There was Patricia, walking calmly toward the entrance, her leather bag in her hand. The room watched in absolute silence as the events unfolded on screen. Vincent blocking her path. The contempt in his voice clearly audible through the audio system. Patricia trying to explain, trying to show her identification. Then came the moment that made several people in the room gasp. Vincent's hand striking Patricia across the face. The sound echoed through the hearing room like a gunshot. "Turn it off," Vincent whispered. "Please turn it off." "No," Patricia said firmly. "Everyone in this room needs to see what you did. Everyone needs to witness the truth." The video continued. Vincent slamming Patricia against the wall. His words, dripping with hate, filled the room. "Trash like you doesn't belong in this building." When the video ended, the hearing room was silent except for the sound of Vincent crying quietly at the defendant's table. "That video," Patricia said, "has been viewed by investigators from the Department of Justice, the FBI's Civil Rights Division, and the Federal Prosecutor's Office. They've all reached the same conclusion. This was not a security guard doing his job. This was a crime." She pulled up another document on the screen. "But this isn't just about what happened this morning. This is about a pattern of behavior that's been going on for years." The screen showed a list. Names and dates scrolling past. "These are the 87 complaints filed against security guards in this building over the past 3 years. Let me read you some of them." Patricia began reading, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Mrs. Rosa Martinez, age 67, complained that guard Drake called her offensive names during a routine bag check and shoved her when she asked for his badge number. Complaint dismissed as unsubstantiated. She continued. Mr. David Kim, a federal prosecutor, complained that guard Drake stopped him from entering the building because he didn't look like a lawyer. Guard Drake refused to look at his credentials and threatened him with arrest. Complaint dismissed as unsubstantiated. One by one, Patricia read the complaints. Each one a story of abuse. Each one dismissed. And forgotten. Until now. Dr. James Washington, a visiting professor, complained that guard Drake arrested him in the parking garage because he didn't believe a black man could afford that car. Dr. Washington spent 4 hours in detention before someone finally checked his identification. Complaint dismissed as unsubstantiated. By the time Patricia finished reading, there were tears on many faces in the room. These weren't just complaints anymore. They were testimonies to years of suffering, years of people being treated as less than human by someone who was supposed to protect them. "Mr. Drake," Patricia said, turning to face him directly, 43 of these 87 complaints have your name on them. 43 people tried to tell us what you were doing. 43 people were ignored." Vincent looked up, his face streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I didn't know you were. I mean, if I'd known you were important." "Stop," Patricia interrupted, her voice sharp. "Do you hear yourself? You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you did it to someone with power instead of someone you thought was powerless." She leaned forward. "Every single person on this list deserved the same respect you would give to me if you'd known who I was. That grandmother you shoved deserved respect. That professor you arrested deserved respect. Every person you've abused over the years deserved the same dignity you would give to someone you thought was important." Patricia stood up, walking around the desk to address the entire room. "This hearing isn't just about punishing Mr. Drake. It's about sending a message. A message that every person who walks through these doors, regardless of who they are or what they look like, deserves to be treated with basic human dignity." She turned back to Vincent. "You told me this morning that I needed to learn my place. Well, Mr. Drake, you're about to learn yours." The room held its breath, waiting for justice to finally be served. Patricia stood in front of the hearing room, looking at every face gathered there. This wasn't just about Vincent Drake anymore. This was about something bigger. Something that had been broken for far too long. "I want to tell you all something," she began, her voice softer now but no less powerful. "When Vincent Drake struck me this morning, when he slammed me against that wall and called me trash, I made a choice. I could have told him immediately who I was. I could have flashed my badge and watched him crumble with fear." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I didn't. Do you know why? Because I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see how far he would go. I wanted to know what happens to people in this building when they can't flash a badge to protect themselves. Patricia walked slowly across the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. What I experienced this morning, that violence, that hatred, that complete disregard for my humanity, that's what dozens of people have experienced at Vincent Drake's hands. The only difference is that I have the power to do something about it. She stopped in front of Vincent's chair. He couldn't even look at her. Mr. Drake, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. I don't hate you. I feel sad for you. Because somewhere along the way, you learned to see people as less than human based on how they look. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your uniform gave you permission to abuse people. And somewhere along the way, the system failed all of us by protecting you instead of stopping you. Patricia turned back to face the room. But that changes today. Right here, right now, we're going to show that no one is above accountability. Not security guards, not administrators, not anyone. She returned to her seat at the desk and picked up her official stamp, the one she used to make final decisions that couldn't be reversed. Vincent Drake, based on the evidence presented here today, I find you guilty of all charges. You're terminated from your position effective immediately. Your security clearance is permanently revoked. And I'm referring your case to the federal prosecutor's office for criminal charges. The stamp came down with a decisive thunk. But Patricia wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm ordering a complete review of every single case you've been involved in over your 12 years of employment. Every person you've detained, every report you've filed, every complaint that was dismissed. They're all going to be re-examined. She looked at Thomas Webb and the other guards who had supported Vincent's lies. As for you gentlemen, you're suspended pending investigation. If we find evidence that you've engaged in similar behavior, or that you've lied to protect Mr. Drake, you'll face the same consequences. Harold Foster stood up. Dr. Hayes, I want to apologize. If I'd known. That's exactly the problem, Patricia interrupted gently. It shouldn't matter if you knew who I was. Every person who comes to this building deserves to be believed, deserves to be heard, deserves to be treated with respect. We need to create a system where people like Mr. Drake can't operate with impunity for 12 years. She addressed the entire room now. Here's what's going to change. Starting next week, we're implementing mandatory bias training for all security personnel. We're installing body cameras that can't be turned off or tampered with. We're creating an independent review board that will investigate every complaint without bias. Patricia's voice grew stronger. And most importantly, we're going to reach out to every single person who filed a complaint that was dismissed. We're going to listen to their stories. We're going to believe them. And if they were wronged, we're going to make it right. The room erupted in applause. It started with one person, then spread until everyone was standing, clapping, some crying as years of frustration and pain finally found recognition. When the room quieted down, Patricia spoke one more time, directly to Vincent. Mr. Drake, you asked me this morning if I knew my place. Let me tell you what my place is. My place is standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. My place is making sure that bullies like you can never abuse your power again. My place is right here, fighting for justice. She stood up. This hearing is concluded. Mr. Drake, security will escort you from the building. You're not welcome here anymore. As Vincent was led away, still crying, still broken, Patricia finally allowed herself to feel the weight of what had happened. Her hands were shaking. The bruise on her face throbbed. But she'd done it. She'd faced down her attacker, and 1.3 months later. The changes came swiftly after that day. The investigation into security misconduct uncovered a pattern of abuse that shocked even Patricia. 12 guards were fired. Several faced criminal charges. The entire security department was restructured from the ground up. But the most important changes were in the people themselves. The federal building became a place where everyone felt safe, where complaints were taken seriously, where security guards saw their job as protecting people, not controlling them. Vincent Drake was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for assault on a federal official and civil rights violations. In prison, without his uniform and badge, he was forced to confront what he'd become. Patricia heard through her contacts that he'd started attending counseling, trying to understand the hatred that had driven him. She hoped he'd find redemption someday. But she knew that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about making sure what happened to her could never happen to anyone else. The grandmother Vincent had shoved, the professor he'd arrested, the prosecutor he'd humiliated. All of them were contacted and offered formal apologies. Some accepted financial compensation. Others just wanted acknowledgement that they'd been telling the truth all along. Patricia continued her work, but now she carried the weight of that morning with her. The bruise faded, but the memory remained. And whenever she saw someone being treated unfairly, whenever she heard someone being dismissed because of who they were, she remembered. She remembered what it felt like to be powerless. And she used her power to make sure others never had to feel that way again. Because that's what justice really means. Not revenge. Not punishment for its own sake. But creating a world where everyone, no matter who they are, is treated with dignity and respect. Vincent Drake thought he knew who belonged in that building and who didn't. He thought his uniform gave him the right to decide who deserved respect. He was wrong. And now, everyone would know just how wrong he was. This story reminds us that justice isn't about the powerful crushing the weak. It's about the powerful using their strength to protect those who need protection. It's about speaking up when others are silenced. It's about believing that every person deserves dignity. Share this story if you believe in standing up to bullies. Share it if you've ever felt powerless and wish someone with power would fight for you. Share it because somewhere, right now, someone needs to hear that justice is possible. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And together, we can create a world where everyone knows their true place, as equals deserving of respect and dignity.